Welcome to the city. I'm Anthony Wilson, the Public Information Officer for the City of San Angelo. And joining us today is one of our Assistant City Managers, Rick Weise. He is here to talk about the improvements along the Concho River. Rick, thanks for being with us.
I'm glad to be here. It's a topic I'm always excited to visit about.
Well, it is an exciting project, and of course, it sort of got its genesis back when Lake Nasworthy was dredged a few years ago. Talk a little bit about how that project has led to the improvements along the river.
You know, that one was a good start for it. Of course, that was a project that was funded by the sales tax that was passed in '99. And in the '90s, you know, Lake Nasworthy was being discussed a lot as far as water quality, as far as the capacity that the lake could hold, and just from a recreational standpoint about dredging the lake. At the same time, there was a lot of discussion going on about the river itself, and we had a lot of erosion of the banks. I happened to work with the river corridor at the time, and that was one of the topics that they talked about regularly, that we really needed to stabilize the banks at that river at that time was a big topic. And so once that passed and that project was completed, I think, and the citizens had a lot of support for what had happened and saw what could take place at the lake, then of course, you know, the next sales tax came around as far as passing the next phase, which then did include the river, which was not only the dredging but several components.
Let's talk a bit. You mentioned the funding for the project, the half-cent sales tax. Talk a little bit about how this project was funded both with sales tax and with some other sources.
Oh yeah, this one was a prime example of a large group of players who came together to make it happen. Really, the total of this project is $14.7 million. Most of that came from, of course, the sales tax. The next components were typically grants. The Health Foundation was our next largest grant, and the Health Foundation is always a wonderful player with the city as far as looking at projects that can improve the quality of life here in San Angelo. And of course, so they came to bat and got in on the project. The UCRA also is another one. They were able to leverage TCEQ dollars as far as for our bank stabilization, those type of things, which would help improve our water quality. So they were a great player. We had other grant dollars from the Texas Parks and Wildlife, trail grants, outdoor project grants. We also had some HUD dollars that were stimulus dollars that went into the project, and just a multitude of things. But all of that came together to make a great project and something that the citizens should be really proud of.
Now, the project and the improvements have been designed by Craig Kinney, who is a local San Angelo architect. Talk a little bit about what it meant to have someone who is local, who fully understands and appreciates what the river means to the community, designing what these improvements would be and look like.
You know, that's a great topic. When we began working on the project, we looked at a variety of people who could design and work on the project, but it became evident that while other architects may have been good at those type of projects and had done it in the past, we really wanted someone who had and understood the San Angelo way of life. What we were looking for, of course, was not a San Antonio, was not Austin, but San Angelo. And so we started looking for a local architect, and we went through a process which we had the council assistance with, a committee to look at selection, and Craig Kinney and his firm rose to the top of that challenge and presented some great ideas. And you know, the real goal there was to create something that was unique to San Angelo. It wasn't something you see in every other town, but was something the citizens were proud of.
In addition to creating something that was unique to our community, what sort of instructions did you give Craig Kinney and his staff as far as what the aim of the improvement should be and what you were hoping to accomplish?
You know, that's always tough to do when you have a lot of people with differing opinions, and really the goal was to create something that blended in with the environment here, that fit the style of our citizens. San Angelo is known for its hospitality and the people here, and so something that blended with all of that. So really, as he started looking at it, one of the big things that we wanted to do was try to blend whatever we put in there with the surroundings. So not something that was so totally at contrast that it, but at the same time something that was fun, that added some excitement there. And one of the things that you'll see down there, and I forgot to mention when we were talking about those that we received dollars from, we received a grant from the National Endowment for the Arts, which is the first one of those that we have received on the city end. And so that spoke volumes to putting art into the area as well, and making it a place that encompassed all types of environments and likes and things that people enjoy doing.
The project has essentially consisted of 4 phases, those being dredging, followed by bank stabilization, followed by some trail rehabilitation, and then the addition of some amenities. And I'd like you to sort of walk us through each of those phases and tell us what was done with each one of those, beginning with the dredging.
Right. Well, the dredging was the first one. And initially the dredging would be basically the lower part of the downtown area. We ended up being able to go all the way to Sulphur Draw. So the downtown area itself had been cleaned out and dredged a few years ago. So we were really looking upstream from that to the north. And so we did a lot there. We spent $1.5 million on that. The UCRA helped us coordinate that project. And while that may sound simple, it was actually really challenging, because you don't realize the number of permits you have to actually do those things. There's the Concho water snake that exists, and of course it was an endangered species at the time, so we had to go through the process of trying to get a permitting for that. What we were actually able to do in that regard was, with some help from our legislators, get the snake delisted from the endangered species. It was something that was being proposed anyway, it just had never taken place. So it just was, there were several hoops to jump through in that regard. So the dredging took place first, and I think had great results. It was to help improve our water quality and the depth of the river. The next phase really was the bank stabilization, and there were a lot of different ways to stabilize the bank. We used primarily 3 methods. One were the mats that you put on the surface where you have a sloping ground, so you let it revegetate. The other was riprap, which we already had some of that along the river. And then the next would be, we used a lot of stacked stone. You'll see those in the downtown areas, in our more prominent areas. That also had its list of permits that you had to obtain, and some of those can take up to a year or 2 years to get. In this case, because you're doing that, it sounds simple, but you have to document that you're not decreasing the flow for stormwater to go through, or creating embankments that would cause it to back up. So that project, actually, we were supposed to go from Oaks to Sulphur Draw and stabilizing. Because the project came in under budget, we were able to have additional revenue. So council voted to extend that bank stabilization all the way to Central High School. So that is a huge accomplishment, because we were losing so many trees as the bank sloughed off over the years, much less it was in some cases losing sidewalks. The next phase you talked about was the trails themselves. The trails are chat. We're trying to keep that in most cases. Most of the trail work is being done in-house. We're using our inmates to do a lot of that, and our city crews, because we wanted to really maximize our dollars, and that was a way that we could accomplish that. Some areas we're putting in concrete where we had a lot of wash. You'll see on the city blitz day, we had city crews out working, and that was some of the stuff the city employees did, was actually to pour those areas and rehab the trails. In a lot of areas, the trails weren't necessarily safe, and we needed railing, or they weren't even close to ADA compliant, so we tried to bring all of that into compliance. And of course, I think the last phase you talked about was the amenities, and that's the fun part. I mean, all of it's been fun, but the amenities are great. You'll see all kinds of stuff out there, and we can get into greater discussion about those.
We'll talk a little bit about some of those, and some that maybe strike you personally as the most interesting and fun.
The amenities are where Craig, I think, had a lot of fun and a lot of input, and you'll see over where the old putt-putt course used to be, those of you who may be from San Angelo, that area had become dilapidated. Craig turned that into a games court area. And so you'll see washer pitching areas out there, and all of those kind of things are free to the public. But you'll also see some excitement. It's got, lights that crisscross over the top, and the bridges downtown are now LED lit, so they can change colors. Or if you're having the Pops concert, you can light them up for that. So it starts adding a flare of excitement down. You'll see where we had fountains before, a lot of those have been renovated. But what we tried to do was increase the amount of water, the volume of water. We have a big pumping station now, and to allow the people to get to the water. So a lot of the amenities really allow you to get right up next to the water, and that's a big change, whereas before it was harder to get to. But there's so many amenities, it's hard to, it's one of those things you're gonna have to experience. You're gonna have to walk out there and really see them.
What's been the public reaction thus far to what's been done?
It's been amazing. We've gotten tons of comments, but the most meaningful to me is I'll go out there, and the project's not complete, of course, won't be until this fall. And the number of people already walking the trails, and we're not even finished. And the contractor's been real good about working with that and letting people continue to walk. And so that speaks volumes when you see the usage that it's getting without even being formally open yet.
One last question really quickly. Do you anticipate that there will be other improvements once this project is done, and what might some of those be?
I really think there will. One of the things we're going to do is work on the putt-putt area to develop a public-private partnership there, to bring in a new putt-putt course, paddle boats, those kind of things. Work on the old Neffs area where we're hoping to bring in some businesses that might front there. Another thing is we need to stabilize the banks the rest of the way from Oak Street all the way to the sports complex. And the stormwater group has been willing to work with us on that as far as utilizing stormwater dollars, but also the UCRA has talked about that and leveraging some grant dollars they can get. So I don't think it's going to stop with this. I do think those things are going to happen and continue to develop.
We've been talking with Rick Weise. He is our Assistant City Manager. And when we return, we'll be talking with our airport director about some improvements there. But first, we're going to spotlight another outstanding city employee, Fort Concho's Christopher Morgan.
Christopher Morgan, Education Director, Living History Coordinator at Fort Concho, and I've been here for 17 years, 2 months. Education Coordinator, take care of we have a program, the Frontier School, which has been going on now for 30-some years here at the Fort. We target the area 4th graders, bring them in, give them a little hands-on what it was like to be a child out here on the frontier. Also set up with tours. Visitors come from all over the world to the Fort, so we kind of throw out to them what it really was like here, not the John Wayne, John Ford version. And then I'm in charge of handling the living history, the guys who wear the uniforms and of course, the big guns. When I tell people what I do, they kind of look at me, huh? And then as I explain further, they go, oh, and they're not quite sure until they actually see, I show them pictures of what we do. And it makes for a very unique, good icebreaker for conversations at gatherings and whatnot. It was great. Really was nice to go to a national event. There was like 12,000 some reenactors at the event. Just see that many people of like mind with an interest in history and family, and maybe a little bit crazy to wear wool on a hot, humid day in Pennsylvania. You got to be a little bit left of center, but it was really an amazing, overwhelming experience in aspects. I always used to read about in the books the rattle of musketry, and what did that mean? Now I know what it means. Just to hear constant gunfire, just constant. Even with these single-shot muzzleloaders, you got 12,000 guys shooting each other. It's just a constant thing. Overall, it's just absolutely, just inspiring, just amazing. That's what our ancestors went through. It's just crazy. What is there not to like about heavy field artillery? In a way, I'm following a family tradition. My father is a retired Army artillery officer, and I do have military men in our family. So. It's hard to explain. It's loud, it's obnoxious, just like me. So it's something really to understand the destructiveness of such a simple device, of what it could and couldn't do. And it just, I don't know, it's hard to explain. It really is. Hunt, go to the gun range, restoring a 1950 Ford truck. I've actually recently taken up an interest in gardening, growing me some tomato plants. So play with my dogs, relax. Sometimes after just like to go home, get a cold beverage, and just kick back. I've always loved them. Being of Scot-Irish descent, that music's always around that Celtic flavored music. I first got hit with bagpiping when I was 10 years old. Dad was stationed in Heidelberg, Germany, and the 42nd Regiment, the Black Watch, came to play. And when you hear pipes and drums that loud all at once, it just, whoa. And somebody once said, I think it was Robert Burns, the great Scottish poet, says, if the sound of the pipes does not stir you, you have no soul. So maybe that's true or it's not, but it does stir in me. What got me to play was my father was feeling his mortality. He's a retired Army colonel, had to have a 5-way bypass, and he wants to have a Scottish, the piper, the whole thing. He pulled through. So I thought, I wonder if I can do this. Because it is tradition in a clan, a Scottish clan, if there's a piper in the family, he plays for the chieftain. And in a weird sort of way, my dad is the chieftain of our little clan. And being as I'm a musician anyway with other musical instruments, it wasn't that much of a stretch to go from flutes and whistles and boom to pipes. And once I got the pipes, 6 to 8 weeks later, I was able to put all the pieces together and actually make it sound like something. I knew I was getting better when my wife, instead of closing the door when I was practicing, would actually come in and go, that sounded like something, what was that? So now people pay me to play as opposed to pay me to quit, so it's kind of neat.
Welcome back. We are joined by our airport director, Luis Elguezabal. He is here to talk about the renovations that are ongoing at the terminal at San Angelo Regional Airport. Lou, thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Anthony.
Now, this project seems to be an extension of the previous renovations that occurred at the airport's concourse. Talk about sort of how that project sort of segued into this project.
Well, when I started working for the city, that project was wrapping up, and it was always beautiful, new concourse, new jet bridges, and the thought was always, from the day I started, to continue that architecture and that beauty into the 1950s terminal that we have.
And this project is also meant to improve the customer experience as well as improve the aesthetics. So talk a little bit about what you're hoping to accomplish as far as customers having a better experience as they fly into and out of San Angelo Regional Airport.
One of the biggest problems that we had is in the rental car area and the baggage claim area, we had a very narrow corridor to travel and proceed to a narrow area to pick up bags. We always had issues with folks trying to get a rental car, pick up their luggage, and meet with their family members at the same time, and it was very crowded. So we're expanding that area. Also, we had crisscrossing patterns. As you went into the concourse, you crisscross from the left to the right, and as you exited the concourse into the old terminal, you exited again from left to right in a pattern that is not accustomed in the U.S. So we're fixing that area too.
Now, this project that is ongoing, the terminal renovation, is divided into 3 phases. The first phase is about 95% complete. Talk about what's been done with phase 1.
Phase 1 includes the TSA office areas and work areas, the screening checkpoint, also the administration offices, plus the meter and greeter area and tunnel out of the concourse, a beautiful area that's going to be unveiled shortly. Phase 2, we're doing a lot of work for the airline offices, the airline counters, as well as the rental car and baggage claim, plus the front half, the north half of the facade in the front of the terminal.
We're talking about the first phase, and you mentioned the meet and greet area. So for people who may not be accustomed with what that is, but that's essentially your lobby when you first walk through the front doors of San Angelo.
Correct. Meet and greet is an area where folks from San Angelo can just wait and arriving passengers and greet them in that area. Again, that little area that we had before in the old terminal was maybe a 20 by 30 foot section. And again, when we had large arrivals, especially troops coming back from the war, it was very crowded.
You mentioned also that the workspaces and the offices are improving. So I assume that since the airport was built in the 1950s, as you said, that the space was outgrown several years, if not decades ago.
Correct. We were separated. Our staff was separated into different office areas throughout the terminal. Now we're moving into the lower part of the concourse and the back corner of the terminal.
With the second phase, which is the one that's currently underway, Did you mention that there's some expansion of the space for the baggage claim and for those rental car counters?
Yes, that area, again, when we have 50 passengers coming from one of the regional jets, plus the meters and greeters, plus folks trying to queue up to rent a car, that was very crowded. We had probably 20 feet total width to collect your luggage and get a rental car. Now we're expanding it to an area close to 35 feet. So improving the experience for both those that want to pick up their luggage and rent cars.
So when do you anticipate that your second phase will be complete, and then you'll move into your final phase?
We're looking, Templeton has told me that probably late October, early November of this year is when we'll move from phase 2 to phase 3, and that will finalize that area for the rental cars and baggage claim.
And so for your final phase, the third phase, what's going to happen during that phase?
Oh, that's the biggest phase. We're talking the front entrance of the airport, the crosswalks, monuments up front, plus the complete lobby area, the small cafe above the clouds. That area will be completely renovated and open up all the way to the meet and greet area.
And you had mentioned to me previously a lot of civil work will be done to streets and parking lots and curbs and so forth, correct?
Correct. We're looking at the installing wayfinding signs on Knickerbocker Road that have been approved by the city a while back. We'll be installing that all along Knickerbocker Road with the approval of TxDOT, and also have wayfinding signs inside the airport.
The monument you mentioned, what's going to be done to the monument?
Oh, that you'll see it. What I'm really happy about is the area where the dumpsters sit right next to our front door will be removed. Those dumpsters will be relocated and have a beautiful monument that will welcome folks to San Angelo.
Now, all told, this is going to be a $5.9 million project. How is it being funded?
The FAA is funding 90% of it, $5.1 million. Half-cent sales tax will support $500,000, and that was voter approved back in 2010. And the remaining is going to come from a passenger facility charge. That's $450 that each passenger pays as they fly out.
So that's a user fee in essence that's paying that final portion for people who fly out, and it's charged to their ticket.
Correct.
I see.
So all the users get to pay. None of this is being paid by the general fund of the city.
Is usage up? First, let me backtrack. You mentioned the general fund. For people who don't know, that's property and sales taxes. So none of those sort of taxes are being applied to this project. Is usage of the airport up this year?
It is. Last year, year over year, last year we were 2.6% above 2012 above 2011. This year, so far in the first half of the year, we're up 3% in usage.
How much of that do you think is attributable to the increase in the oil field activity that we're seeing in our area?
I cannot give you an exact amount, but it's a big chunk. Watching folks fly in and out, I see a lot of oil field workers coming in and out of the airport. I also see a lot of companies picking up those workers.
And that increase in the oil field activity, you think is having an impact on the number of flights that you're, or the number of passengers that you're having?
Yes.
What's the likelihood, maybe the possibility, that that increased oil field activity will eventually land you a second carrier to complement American Eagle?
Well, that's one of the things that we're discussing right now with SkyWest Airlines. We just recently attended their headquarters. Mr. Daniel Valenzuela, our city manager, along with our interim Development Corporation Director, Bob Schneeman, and Randy Brooks, a board member. We all attended SkyWest and made a good pitch to SkyWest, and they were very impressed. SkyWest was very interested in us. They liked the oil activity, and they told us, we follow oil. So they're highly interested in a service to Houston, probably adding 2 flights to Houston.
So what was the pitch then that when you went up there to SkyWest and you made to their corporate executives? What did you say to them in order to try to lure them?
Well, this is our second visit. During the first visit, we provided all the stats for San Angelo. This go around, we brought all the energy services statistics that we've seen and the uptick on those statistics. That's what caught their eye.
And so if we are to land some flights to Houston via SkyWest, when would you expect that would happen?
Well, right now, the next step for SkyWest is to meet with United Airlines, which is their partner in Houston. And we're looking probably 6 to 9 months out for United to make a decision whether they want to have the service or not. But if not, SkyWest is interested in that service.
And you recently added another flight for American Eagle, correct?
At the beginning of this year, the American Eagle added a fifth flight to Dallas-Fort Worth, and our flights are pretty full.
What do you think it would mean for business for San Angelo Regional Airport if you were to have another destination in addition to Dallas?
A very viable airport is what others used to consider ports in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Those cities that have a good airport with good service will prosper. And that's something that we hopefully will go back to, especially with a service to Houston.
And just remind us, when was it last that San Angelo offered service to Houston?
We had direct service to Houston up until October 2008 when Continental pulled out.
And of course, then there was a recession, and that
Correct.
led to them pulling out.
But in the past year, our energy numbers have increased, and that's really what's driving the need for additional service.
Do you hear a lot from passengers who are wanting to get to Houston from San Angelo and they're having to fly through Dallas and hearing
all
some
the
of those
time,
frustrations?
absolutely. Not only do I hear from passengers directly, but I hear from the chamber, I hear from other industry leaders. They want that service back to Houston.
Do you think at some point it would be viable to have service heading west from San Angelo?
At this point, no. Our consultants have extrapolated all the statistics, and our number 2 market is the Houston market, believe it or not. Number 3 being Las Vegas, and number 4 being Orlando. So right now, Dallas being the busiest destination for us, Houston being the second, our best bet is to go to Houston. And again, Houston service by United is a major hub. So any flight to Houston, if you're not going to Houston, you can still connect anywhere in the world.
You are, as we have been talking about, engaged in these terminal renovations right now. Those should be completed sometime next spring. Following that, do you foresee any other big capital projects that you'll be undertaking that will improve the customer experience at Mathis Field?
Well, we always have capital improvements to our airfield, and actually we're undertaking one right now. It's out on the street for runway 321 runway 321 runway intensity lights. However, the public doesn't get to see those improvements. We do have, after the terminal, some improvements to the parking lots, maybe put some covers on the parking lots. That's still far out, but yeah, we do have plans for improving the passenger experience.
We've been talking with Luis Elguezabal. He is the director of San Angelo Regional Airport, and we hope you'll join us for the next episode of The City.